Okay, hi guys. So this will be about the HotPlug support. We'll deal with what are these, what do we have today, what's wrong with it, how do we solve it. Basically, we want to have an event, so we'll deal with these notifications. Basically, when you add something, you have a list of devs, so we'll deal with this list. We'll talk about how the app's supposed to work with that. A little bit about the kernel here, and the challenges. What are these events? Basically, when you add a card, you get a plug, right? When the server is on, you could add a card, and you'll get a plug event, or you can remove it, and then you get the unplug event. The same is true even for VMs via SysFS, right, or virt. You could get the same events if you do if you load the model, and if you have such a failure, so you'll get a fatal event too. So this will all facilitate these two events. So what do we have in the code? So if we remove a dev, we actually get a fatal event right now. The kernel will actually kill all the CQs and stuff, everything, and from that point and on, everything that we do, we will get this code. And basically, this will cause a leak because we have a context in the app, and the close call will get the error, and then it won't free up the space. So, so this is the major thing here. But another problem is that maybe we had some works in the QP. But now that it's dead, we won't get the completions, right? So we would like to have some kind of simulation about the completion with a flash code, right? So this is another thing that is not by spec, but it will be nice to have. If we go to the CM land, so we do have an event, but again, it's only if we have a context. Otherwise, we get nothing. In the plug case, it's even worse because we don't have anything. So what we have wanted to have is maybe an event, and then we'll rescan everything. So That's the event themselves. And the purpose here is that if we have this guide, we'll have to scan a list of devs. So how do we think we can solve this? So first of all, we need some kind of an we need the events, right? So we need somehow to tell the libs that something has happened. So that's the first thing here. And when we do that, we need to add or del things from this list. So we have to, we need some kind of a non-static list. Basically, when we del a dev, maybe there is a context that uses this dev. So we can't just free it, because then we'll get a dangling pointer. So we need some kind of reference count. But when it is down to 0, we need some kind of a way to free it. And because part of it was at the vendor space, we need a callback. Another thing is that we need a way to close everything in the kernel, because we can't just wait until the app will kill its HPDs and stuff. There is the completions part that we have talked about them here. And there's another issue with the IOCTL tree. So that's basically the components. So why do we want to be notified? So there is two major cases here. One is if you have a context and it's dying, so you want to know that. So that actually works okay today. You get the leak, but at least from the kernel side, it's safe. The other part is if you don't hold it, if you don't hold this the dev, and something happened. And then maybe we added a new device and we want to use it. Or maybe we want to use both of them, like here. And there was a session on Tuesday, I think, about Azure, and they plug out the dev according to the workload, right? So you'll get a lot of them here. So we have a partial solution for if we have a context, but if we don't, it's not working today. So we need some kind of an event, and there are a few options here. One is the netlink one. You get a kobj add and del for changes. And another thing is to use the HUDEV. It's a job, basically. In our case, we have a file system file for every dev, so we could listen to the events on the file system, sysfs. And we could have some kind of a new FD or maybe the CM to post us this events, right? So this is another way to do this. So the purpose of all of this are actually to maintain a dev list, right? So why do we need this one? So basically, we have a list of devs. And when we want to use one of them, we get this list, we scan it. This is actually goes to the sysfs. And then we just say, I want a dev with this name or the GUID. In 2017, there was a new code that actually could rescan the list and add things that were not there and delete things that are no longer in the system. And another thing in the CM land, it scans the list only when it loads. So it's kind of assumed as a static list in the code, but it actually isn't really static in life. So how does the app should use this? So first, you should get the event file. And this could be either netlink or the UDEV or our file or the new file we've talked about here. So we don't really care what it is, but you get this file. It's better to move to non-blocking mode. And then you just eat the events because maybe there are some events that you don't want. And then you wait until you get a plug or an unplug, and you say, I'll scan again. This thing, we don't have this yet in the code. What we do have is the unplug on some things that you work on. And in that case, the kernel first, he kills everything. And then it fires this. The app should close every CQQP, everything. Right now, as we stated, it will get minus EIO, and this will cause a leak. But in the ideal way, it will just be a successful call. Everything else should be an error because you can't have, for example, a PD on something that is dead, right? So that's easy. And afterwards, you have to close the dev. So in the kernel, things are pretty much easy. You get an event there that the dev is no longer there. And you have to kill everything. In the kernel land, you have actually an object and a U object. That is the user space representative. right? So what you would want to do is to kill this one, but you want to keep the U object. Simply because you want to know that sorry, that at some point you will get a call that will close the QP, and you will say, hey, this one is dead, so it's fine to say success code. Currently, it just kills everything, both of them. The things we have now is that this call is only supported in MLX 4 and 5, and I hope more will do this. And that because we lack support of having this while this is dead, you get a -EIO error, and you get a leak. In the LIBS, we changed a bit things. This verb call now can rethink the list, the dev list, via sysfs. We have a new call to roll back things we did here when we first set this dev. We have reference count because, as we said, we can't kill something that we use, and we still lack events. This general events that we talked about. Sorry. So the problem. So I'll start with the IOCTL. IOCTL lets you have some vendor-specific stuff. That means you have a common way to parse, but you have some static code and declarations in the vendor's code that actually tells the parser how to do its job. So obviously, when we remove the model, we don't have neither the code nor the static part. So then if we get a command from the app, we won't know what to do with it. So the static part is easy because you could just say, I'll do a copy. The code part is not that easy because you can't just copy the functions. So if you think about that a bit, you may figure out that you don't really need these functions. If it's something that adds a new object, you can't do that on a dev that is dead. So it's not. It doesn't mean anything now. If it's remove function, then the object was killed when we did disassociate, right? So basically now we only want to kill the U object. And that's easy, you don't really need anything. So as long as the remove functions are simple, and you just have a function that gets a handle and does nothing else. You could just use the common core functions, and then you don't need the vendor's code. A second challenge is the completions. Maybe you have some work. Yeah, 5 minutes. Okay, great. Maybe you have some work in the QPs that is still pending. So although it's not mandatory by the spec, you want to it will be nice if we could have such a flash error in the CQ. So, but if you think about that, the kernel is no longer there. So you can't just rely on the model. So because the poll function is vendor specific, and I think all of us do this in the user space, the solution I think should be vendor specific too. So for example, you could, before you die, you could have a bit in the CQ and write the a number of completions you have to simulate. And then after you get all the standard things, you could simulate the rest via your library. The last thing is the CM. Right now, it does have its remove event, but it scans the list only once, and it lacks these two events. That's all. That's all I have. Any questions?